Hi everyone. This is a introduction video interview in which we're going to discuss the manifestation, design and functioning of the atom, in what it is, why it exists, and how it came into creation within its manifested functioning. And as an initial starting point for those listening to this video interview, we suggest to unconditionally hear and see what is being explained, illustrated and shown, so as to assist and support self in walking this process with us, and for a moment letting go of all current knowledge and information regarding science and biology. Because as we're walking this series, which is the psychology of the atom, we came across a documentary referred to as The Atom. We will be providing the details with this video interview as a reference. We walked the series, and within it basically discusses the history of the atom within the context of human beings within the fields of science and biology, and the basic pioneers of the atom history and their theories and hypotheses and processes of discovering the atom. However, within the very starting point approach of human beings has been through and as the mind which exists within a linear space-time continuum in basically only vertical and horizontal timelines. And from within that starting point of time, the atom has been interpreted. However, the very manifestation and existence of the atom is manifested within physical multidimensionality. And within that, we will show, illustrate, and explain how the pioneers of the atom theories and hypotheses is in fact fragmented in how the atom is being looked at from only actually one dimension, and the total equality and oneness within which the atom exists is not being seen, understood or grasped because of how it is being approached through the mind existing in a linear space-time continuum, when the very functioning existence and manifestation of the atom is multidimensional. And what is furthermore interesting is within the documentary, within the first part of the documentary, it is noted that for the sciences to be able to progress to discovering, analyzing, seeing, understanding the atom, they had to let go of all of their past knowledge and information about science in itself, in how this physical manifested existence operate and function, to be able to have gotten as far as they did in terms of the current understanding of the atom. And this moment here with these video interviews is equal to and one with such a moment for you to be able to progress into seeing, realizing, understanding how the atom really in fact functions within its totality, multidimensionality, its reason, its purpose, its design, its programming for existing. One has to let go of all one's current knowledge and information of the atom. Let go of knowledge and information, meaning one will find that within the video interview you'll have a tendency of referencing the current knowledge and information that one has of the atom in a form of protection and argumentation and simple dismissal because of one's belief or rooted belief within the current existence of how the atom function. So what we're suggesting is when those moments of wanting to, desiring to, or needing to fight it in terms of what we're going to be explaining and showing and illustrating, is to allow oneself to simply breathe and hear what it is we're saying and showing. We will be, within many interviews to follow, be taking on theories and hypotheses in the current understanding, and that developed the current understanding of the atom, to show the fragments of the current understanding and approach to the atom, and why and how it is that it's understood as it is in this moment, and what is it that's in fact being missed, not being seen, not being considered, because of in fact not being here in equality and oneness with and as the atom as self. And therefore within the very approach of the atom, it is done within the context of observation, within separation, and thus within that starting point, the only approach that is in fact here with regards to the atom is just interpretation, perception, limited within the current confines of how to understand the atom. But again, the atom cannot be in its totality seen, realized, and understood because of the limited means that currently exist to understand it. So we're going to, within this first introduction video interview, have a look at only the primary basics of what the atom consists of and exists as. And this will be our platform from which we will be taking on all of the current hypotheses and theories in mainstream science in relation to the atom. And thus from there we will be expanding and specifying the total designed functioning manifestation of the atom. So for one to grasp the totality of what we're going to be walking is to walk the interviews with us. One is more than welcome to make notes of questions in relation to one's own process of facing this point, and within and during and through all the video interviews there are still questions. We'll be more than welcome to assist and support with perspectives. But for now we ask to unconditionally hear, walk with us, equal and one, and see, realize and understand that the very starting point approach has been in separation, and therefore the atom in its purity cannot be understood within its totality just because of that starting point. So here the atom will speak and walk through how we really function and exist. So what we'll start with is the basic elements of the atom, as the total atom itself, the electrons, and the nucleus as the protons and the neutrons. Now, before we start here, what must be understood is the mind consciousness system. Within Desteni, we have, throughout process, explained the current existence of the human being as a mind consisting of a conscious, subconscious, and unconscious, and within and through that, how we have functioned, survived, and existed within existence as personalities, and have driven our living through energy as reactions of emotions and feelings, as the basic elements that the mind consciousness system consists of and exists as. And one can simply reference this for oneself, in one's own mind, in how we think, in how we have internal conversations, in how we experience reactions. Those very parts of oneself reveal the reality that we're in fact existing as a pre-programmed system, simply within the notion of how we have thoughts automatically coming up, how we're not in control of our reactions, and how we're constantly and continuously preoccupied within and as internal conversations. And if we have a look at sciences today, the very science is a system in itself that has been created, designed, programmed, and manifested through knowledge and information as the mind's interpretation of how reality, the physical, and existence function. And therefore even science today is in fact a mind system as a holder of knowledge and information in relation to what it has experienced reality, the physical, and existence to be from a interpretive starting point. So the very science of the atom is a mind system approach to understanding existence as a whole, and from that perspective, the entirety and totality of education has become the mind's process of understanding, grasping, and conceiving itself within existence. So what it has become in terms of education in, for example, science, is thus more a trying to understand, trying to grasp, trying to conceive ourselves as minds within existence, instead of our starting point being equal to and one with the very physical, in being it, understanding it, and becoming it as ourselves. And therefore what is not being seen, realized, and understood is how we really in fact exist and function within existence, because we've not been equal to and one with the physical in any way whatsoever, in really understanding it within that equality and oneness as ourselves. That's why we're approaching everything through knowledge, information, interpretation, observation, equations as tools to try and understand, conceive, and interpret existence. And from a certain perspective, the basic nature of existence is relatively grasped. However, the actuality of what is really happening within and as it is not seen, realized, and understood at all, because it's really existent within a multidimensional, interdimensional, physical reality that we cannot see, that we cannot interact with, because we are in absolute total separation from and of it, because we're manifested within and through a mind, preoccupied within a conscious, subconscious, an unconscious system within ourselves. And from that very manifestation of ourselves, we cannot be equal and one, and therefore the equality and oneness of everything is not seen, realized, and understood. So within that, understand that the very creation of the atom in how it exists has in fact been in direct relationship with this mind consciousness system that we are and existing within. The very creation, design, and programming of the atom was for the purposed functioning of ourselves as mind. The very nature and experience and the ability to have thoughts, internal conversations, and reactions is due to and because of the energy that we are existing as within ourselves. That very energy is what is produced by the mind consciousness system through the atom. And this relationship between the mind and the atom will also explain and give perspective of why it is and how it is we're not seeing the interdimensions, the multidimensions, the equality and oneness that is here within the physical. Why it is and how it is that in the past, and not too many years ago, people could directly see the interdimensions, communicate with those that's crossed over, be able to shift dimensions, be able to materialize, and how it is that we have become so limited, so enslaved into a physical existence that we cannot even directly communicate to, and that we cannot even directly see and understand as ourselves, but have to try and work out, create, design, program ways to interpret and understand it, and really see it for what it is, instead of simply being here equal and one with it and communicating with it as self and really seeing how it's working as self. And this is what the opportunity is here now through the portal, as how we are directly communicating what is in fact here. So the relationship between the atom and the mind consciousness system, that which is keeping the mind consciousness system stable in its existence as a conscious, subconscious, unconscious, and consciousness, as well as the energy that is functioning within, through, and as it, is this very relationship between the atom and the mind consciousness system. So the atom has been designed, programmed, and manifested as a controlled container. This controlled container is what contains, maintains, and holds the very real substance of here, of life, of eternity, if you will. In the past, in relation to the manifestation and relationship between the mind and the physical, as the manifestation of the atoms was not so controlled and contained, and therefore human beings had the ability to interact with directly the interdimensions. However, through time, the mind's ability to enslave, to control, to maintain, direct, and influence human beings' access to physical, to substance, to that eternal life manifestation of here, of equality and oneness, the more the relationship between the mind and the physical as the atoms specified and evolved. So the basic nature of evolution is in fact, and has been, the mind's ability to evolve within enslaving mankind to not have access to this substance of life, of eternity, of equality and oneness, that would in fact give one that ability to be able to interact with, see, communicate and understand what is here as self, because that is the very substance of equality and oneness, in fact. So the atom then, through time, had been specified as a controlled container of that very substance. Now, this was done so to ensure that human beings do not get access to that substance, because obviously if they did, there would be more of equality and oneness, more freedom in being equal to and one with everything and everyone that is here. And obviously the creators of the generations that's gone before us had deliberate initiative in ensuring that human beings remain enslaved, controlled, and directed to only function within their pre-programming as their mind consciousness system, to be able to become energy producers for the existence of heaven, for the existence of the totality of human beings as minds, and for the very survival and continuation of the enslavement of existence to only a diminished, limited form of functioning and existing to its utmost degree. And within that, humanity, this world, earth, this physical manifested existence was constantly and continuously maintained, controlled, directed, influenced, and so enslaved within this very relationship between the mind and the atom. In terms of what the atom initially was within its natural stated expression, was a molecule. Was a simple structurally designed expression that stood as the constitution of and the expression as a substance of here, that equality and oneness. And when the creators of existence started becoming aware of that molecule in terms of the power it holds to be able to set beings free in their understanding, their beingness, their becoming and their living of this equality and oneness, they immediately designed that molecule into what is now known as the atom which maintains, controls, and directs the extent and amount of substance, life substance, here-ness, that equality and oneness can be accessed by the very physical, the mind and the being within the mind and the physical, so as to ensure that no human being, that no being, no manifestation within existence has any access to that life substance, so that existentially throughout all dimensions, existences, times, layers, everything was maintained, controlled, directed, and enslaved, so that the creators could stood within and as the ultimate power, creator of existence as a whole. So this here then became the design, the programming, and the manifestation of the atom to ensure that human beings do not get access to life, to substance, to equality and oneness. And that is the purposed functioning of the atom. Okay, now that we've got a bit of history in terms of the creation of the atom, and seeing, realizing, and understanding that the very functioning of the atom is not natural in its existence, but that it was in fact pre-programmed for the context of the mind, the being within the mind and within the physical, so as to ensure eternal enslavement. Now, let us have a look at the basics of what the atom consists of and exists as in relationship to the mind, and how it is that the atom was controlled in containing substance, so that what would get access to that substance is only the mind, the very mind system that was pre-programmed, designed and manifested by the initial creators of what is now known as humanity, Earth, and this physical manifested existence. And therefore the access was only allowed to the mind consciousness system, because the mind consciousness system within its very nature is a enslavement program functioning within its own consciousness, and therefore was, because of its very pre-programming, trusted to be able to excavate the required substance from within the atom for only its own functioning and survival, in ensuring the continued enslavement of mankind through the conscious, subconscious, and unconscious mind in and as the experience of energy. And it is through the atom, in amalgamating and infusing with substance, that human beings became simply energy producing organic robotic machines, living out a pre-programmed life design as the mind consciousness system for the production of infinite energy for heaven to exist, and for heaven to exist the continued existence of the mind consciousness system, which had been created, manifested, programmed in the image and likeness of the creators, which was dependent on and existing of heaven as the very energy that we produced as minds. So obviously, in terms of restricting the access to substance within existence as a whole, the very creators enslaved themselves to and as their own creation, and became equally as one dependent on the very energy that their own creations as the mind was producing through and as the access of substance. So they would give up that absolute and total access to and as substance just to ensure that they remain in power and control, in essence, God of existence as a whole, in where they would separate themselves from substance through the atom, and understand that the very creation of the atom not only existed within this physical manifested existence, but also within the heavens, the interdimensions. Everything went into complete lock-in into this relationship between the mind and the atom, and therefore the very dependency of existence on the energy that was produced by the mind in relationship to the atom. Obviously, that very relationship in terms of the creators as the races that existed before the creation and existence of mankind, earth, and existence did not comprehend that they were in fact enslaving themselves into their own creation in separating their total access from substance naturally, and where they could automatically access substance. However, in terms of that history, will be walked within different video interviews. In this video interviews, we're simply focusing on the purpose of the existence of the atom in relation to the mind and energy. And so through time, obviously the creators did not comprehend what it was and how they were in fact enslaving themselves to their own creation, in the extent to which they become eventually dependent on the energy that human beings were creating as minds through the physical within the atom. And the basic nature of existence as a whole became where human beings within their mind, in generating energy through their participation as the mind and the extraction of substance through the atoms, became then energy machines that would transfer the energy they were producing, creating, and manifesting through the relationship between the mind and the atoms, and were channeling it through into and as the heavens and the interdimensions that had through time become dependent on energy to be able to exist and function, because existence in totality became enveloped, amalgamated, infused in their very manifestation as energy. And therefore, through time, in how the physical existence separated from the heavens, in not being able to interact or see or directly communicate, was because the very nature of the atoms within the physical contained existence started solidifying more and more and more within their interrelationships, and the atoms' complexity in their functioning within the physical manifested existence accumulated because of the additional relationship between the mind and the physical. That mind-physical relationship did not exist within the heavens or the interdimensions, and therefore it became wholly only energy, whereas this physical existence had the relationship between the mind and the physical and started solidifying and densifying more and more and more as the mind started evolving within the physical, and so automatically the atoms started evolving to be able to facilitate the evolved mind's functionings, programs, constructs, and manifestations. And simply because of the evolution of the programs, the systems, the constructs of the mind, it equally as one made the functioning of the atom more complex, dense, layered in its multi-dimensions, and within that constant, continuous functioning, interrelation, and direct relationship between the mind, physical, and the atom, a process of solidification and densification manifested. And this is why now today there is a total absolute separation between human beings, the interdimensions, as well as the very physical, because the mind integrated into the physical through extracting substance within the atom to such an extent that it completely took over the mind, the human physical body as an actual parasite, and the human being as an actual being manifested within the mind consciousness system now stand equal to and one with that extent of separation, where we're not even aware of our very breathing with our human physical body, and have got no concept, understanding, relation, communication, or direct equal and one here-ness with the human physical body, unless one in fact become a system within education in the current understanding, interpretation, as approach to how existence operate and function, and that also again only within the context of the limitations of the mind, and not in fact in equality and oneness. Alright, so now we have a basic overview of the history of why the atom exists in relation to the mind in its purposed functioning of and for the mind consciousness system in extracting substance and utilizing that substance for energy production that we today, for example, within ourselves as human physical bodies experience as reactions, emotions and feelings, and then within Earth as a whole in the energy that is produced in and with, for example, the atomic bomb. All of it is transmuted, transformed substance of life, of here-ness, of equality and oneness through the mind. And we will also, within the video interviews to follow, have a look at the various different forms of energy that exist in this world, in this reality, and how and why it is and has been transformed into a form of energy that contain vibration, electricity and magnetics, which is and sound, which is more the parts, elements and constructs that the mind consciousness system consists of and exists as, and is not necessarily the actual real substance of life, of here, in which eternity in fact exists. And how within that we have, as a humanity and as a physical existence as a whole, limited ourselves from that equality and oneness through energy. So let us now have a look at the specific elements in terms of the atom and how it interrelate with the mind consciousness system in being able to see why electrons exist, what the nucleus is with the protons and the neutrons, and then how the atom as a whole function in simply that purposed alignment as programming in excavating and extracting substance and mixing, amalgamating and infusing that substance with mind as systems that create what we now know as energy. Alright, so let us start with the nucleus that consists of and exists as protons and neutrons. Now, within the very functioning or existence of the mind, it consists of and exists as the relationships of polarity. Polarity is what creates the friction required to be able to manifest the equation where, with the very advent of friction, energy is required to be able to facilitate that very existence of friction. Because if one have a look in terms of two polar opposites in being in friction with each other, that very polarity opposite requires the very existence of energy. Because if energy wasn't existent in that very relationship, polarity friction would not be able to exist. So it is a relationship of dependence where for friction to exist, energy must exist. For energy to exist, friction must exist. And therefore, within the very design of the mind consciousness system, in its very movement, and one can see it even within one's thoughts, one is in constant, continuous conflict as friction within oneself that generate energy, that manifest the very experience of energy. If one observes one's thoughts in how they move within one's mind consciousness system, it moves within a positive, a negative, a positive, a negative, a positive, a negative. And within that generates a constant, continuous, resonant friction within oneself. And just within one's conscious mind thought participation, one is generating, charging, creating energy as oneself. And for that process to manifest, this is where the relationship between the mind and the atom come in, because as one is constantly and continuously generating, charging, creating energy through one's mind, is every single friction moment where the mind consciousness system extracts substance from the atoms. And it's a constant, continual process that manifests automatically within the relationship between the mind and the atom. So if one have a look at what is currently understood within the design, the programming, and the manifestation of the atom, one has the electrons, which is understood within the context of the negative charge, the protons, the positive charge, and the neutrons, the neutrality in what it consists of and exists as. Within the mind, you have, in essence, the same relationships that exist, where you have your total human physical body, even in relation to the mind, manifested in a positive, a negative, and a neutral, where the very systems of the mind in its very structures and manifestations would be the neutrality in their holistic functioning in facilitating the programs within one's mind consciousness system, and then the left of one's human physical body manifested as a positive that more work with the very energies in facilitating the processes of the movement of energy throughout the mind consciousness system, which functions like the blood of the total mind consciousness system. And then you have your negative as the right side of your human physical body, which has been resonantly manifested as the holders of one's primary systems, as personalities, as patterns of behavior, as systems of knowledge and information, which one, for example, become or train oneself into as a mind through education. And that is as a negative, because the very nature of all of such systems is to take and take and take and take, whereas the positive give and give and give and give. And this then the total nature of the mind consciousness system and how it consists of and exists as the positive, the negative, and the neutral. Now again, in terms of how the mind consciousness system function, it's not necessary to say it's a positive charge or a negative charge or a neutral charge. It is within the density, the intensity, and the very substance as what the parts of the mind consciousness system consist of and exist as, that gives that interpretation of positivity, negativity, and neutrality. And the same is within the atom. It is simply due to the natured functioning, programming, density, and intensity within which the electrons, protons, and neutrons exist, that is interpreted as positive, negative, and neutral. So let us, for example, start with the nucleus. Now, within the nucleus of the atom, that's where all the action takes place, so to speak, and where the mind consciousness system infuse itself with life substance to create energy. Now, within the very atoms, the mind consciousness system's total existence as subsystems and subconstructs that manifest the total mind consciousness system, such as your personalities, all of its systems are integrated and interconnected with the atoms of the human physical body through actual threads that integrate into the membrane of the atom and extend into the center of the atom. And that center is what is currently understood as the nucleus. And within the center of the atom, these threads of the mind consciousness system. Now, if you have a look interdimensionally physically, those very threads look like actual threads, like you would have, for example, you can use the example of wired threads, like wires that's aligning with the membrane of the atom and extending inwards into the center of the atom. So if you, for example, want to draw a big outer circle for yourself and you draw a smaller inner circle, the outer circle would represent the outer rim of the atom, the inner circle the nucleus with the protons and the neutrons. And these wired threads would first align momentarily with the outside of the atom and then extend inwards into and as the center of the atom as the nucleus. And there would be innumerable amounts of these wired threads that would be interconnected with and as the mind consciousness system and the atom, constantly and continuously. So the total mind consciousness system is constantly and continuously integrated, amalgamated and infused with and as the atom. It is its base power source. So with these wired threads then interconnecting the total mind consciousness system with all its subsystems, subconstructs, energies, programs, multi-dimensions, unified fields, networks, everything was always constantly and continuously interconnected with and as the atom. And what would happen is, at a constant continual basis, these wired threads, now obviously not as rigid as actual wire, as metal, it was more liquid in its manifestation. However, it was extremely stable at the same time, because obviously in terms of the nature of mixing the substance with mind resonance required the very nature of those wires to be able to facilitate that process of transfer of substance resonance mix into and as the mind consciousness system to be able to produce, manifest and create energy. So the very nature of those wires was downloading the resonance of the mind consciousness system into the center of the atom and uploading back into itself a pure resonance and substance mix that from there would integrate and vibrate through the mind consciousness system and in that produce energy. Because the very power, if one will, of substance is eternal, meaning there is within itself a power that is not limited, that cannot be equated or suppressed. It can be managed, which is what the very manifestation of the atom was, but it was and is extreme in terms of its here-ness. It is an absolute simple isness of eternity as absolutely everything that one can conceive. And within that very power in how it is then managed with the mind consciousness system is how that resonance of the mind consciousness system amalgamate with substance. Understand the very resonance of the mind consciousness system. Let's maybe first explain and give perspective of that. The very resonance of a mind consciousness system is like these resonant refractions of what the mind consciousness system consists of and exists as. And these refractions look like colored stars. If one would look up into the sky, they actually shine like little stars, like little particles. And that very particles are containers of the total nature, program, substance, and manifestation of the systems that exist within the mind consciousness system. So they look like little manifest particles that in fact shine within, if one have a look interdimensionally physically, because they contain the very intensity, the very substance, the very programs, the information that the subsystems within the mind consciousness system consist of and exist as. So let's say, for example, one of these wired threads that's manifested along the rim of the atom into the center of the atom as the nucleus. One of these wired threads represent a total personality system. Now, what happens is that total personality system is transformed into a resonance, and this resonance is basically taking that total personality system that's integrated from a conscious, subconscious, unconscious, and physical mind perspective, with all its programs of images, of energies, of pictures, of thoughts, the total history of oneself as that personality is then transformed into these resonant particles. So these resonant particles becomes a representation of that total system. So it's like when one would like shatter glass in millions of little pieces. That would be an example of the resonance particles, and they also look like small crystal manifestations, crystallizations. So you can take a glass window, that would be your total personality manifestation, shattered into thousands, millions of pieces would be the resonance of that manifestation. Now, the personality remain within one's mind and physical self. The resonance particles is simply a representation of it, a duplicate in a different form. And that moves through the wired threads into the atom in the center of the atom, and it is those particles that literally absorb substance within the center of the atom. And as they absorb substance, that's where they start manifesting and creating themselves into what is now understood as protons and neutrons. So as the particles amalgamate with substance, they manifest firstly into protons. Protons, as it's now understood, is where the resonance particle of a system merged with substance and now contains the required amount to be able to transfer back into the mind consciousness system for that particular personality system in producing, giving, taking substance with the resonance mix of the mind consciousness system through the wired thread back into the system. And as this manifestation, as the protons and the neutrons, will now explain the relationship between the protons and the neutrons, because the protons transform into neutrons. We'll go into now how and why. The neutrons then, with the purified mind substance particle and substance itself, is then transferred back through the wired threads into and towards the particular system manifestation, as for example the personality system. And as that neutron move through the wired thread back through the system, and I mean it's many that move over and over and over again, move through the wired thread through the membrane of the atom into the systems that's amalgamated with the human physical body. And because of the extent of power in that amalgamation of substance and the mind resonance particle, it vibrates the systems of the mind within the physical. And that vibration is wherefrom the mind consciousness system absorb the energy that's been created through the mind systems vibrating with the movement of the neutrons through the systems. And that very vibration within the mind consciousness system, within all its systems, it has the program that absorbs that vibration, and through that absorption creates what is experienced today as energy. Now, the relationship between the protons and the neutrons is the protons manifest as the substance particle, the resonance particle that's come through the wired threads into the center of the atom, mix with that physical substance of equality and oneness, and that manifests as a proton. And it's experienced to have a positive charge because of the intensity with which that manifestation vibrates, as well as the extent of substance that it contains in holding the basic information of a total system, such as the personality system. And within that, all the information, all the energies, all the layers, all the multi-dimensions is what the total personality system consists of and exists as. However, in terms of ensuring that that very resonance particle does not absorb substance, in terms of becoming a system in itself from within the atom, because it contained all the very information, all the layers, interdimensions, energies, programs. I mean, one can say the total personality system was manifested within that one particle, as all the particles that would move through the wired thread. And to ensure that, because it can, I mean, the moment it would mix in terms of absorbing that substance, it can integrate from within the atom through the physical as an actual personality system. And this is, and how also from within here, how multiple personality disorder, as it is now known, has also come about within the transfer and change from the protons to the neutrons that did not manifest in the speed required. And within that, additional layered personalities had been created, manifested, and designed within the mind consciousness system. But with that, we'll get to much later in explaining some of the manifestations that has come about within the mind consciousness system within humanity, and why and how they exist and what they are. But for now, we'll focus on the basics. So the wired threads then move alongside the rim of the atom into the center. And within the center, the protons we've now explained in terms of what they are and they contain as the resonance particle and substance. So as the particle and substance mix, what happened at the same time is the resonance particle purify as it merge with substance at the same time, which then, as that purification process manifests, transform into a neutron, a neutral substance of, and as mixed with resonance, and all the information, all the programs, the history, the interdimensions, the networks, the programs, I mean everything that constituted a personality system within that resonance particle is then deleted and manifested into only pure resonance. And within that neutron is then automatically reabsorbed by the wired thread into and through back into the system of the mind consciousness system, and as the neutron creates vibration, reabsorbed by the system, created as energy. And that's the process in relation to the nucleus with the protons and the neutrons. And within human beings approaching the atom within only a linear space-time continuum, what is being seen as the atom in its functioning is only one singular moment in time, when the functioning of the atom in its totality is constant, continuous, and multidimensional, and to such an extent that it cannot be trapped in a physical space-time continuum because of the nature, the speed, the multidimensionality within and as which it functions. So one can say that the only interpretation that humanity currently have of the atom is simply taking a picture, one singular picture as one singular fraction of a moment in how the atom functions. And even that is not an accurate picture, because the very device with which the picture has been taken is limited in itself, as the mathematics, the knowledge and information and the science approach that the atom is taken on with. So therefore here, in terms of how the nucleus with the protons and the neutrons in fact interact within the atom. And we will later on get into the detail of also the chemicals, the interrelations between what is currently understood as what the protons, the neutrons, the nucleus and electrons consist of and exist as. Now that whole process of where the proton, the moment the resonance particle mix, infuse and amalgamate with substance, it automatically removes, deletes the programs, the information, the history, because one can say in terms of the resonance particle of a total personality system is like a white sheet of paper with written information on it. That was basically the resonance particle of, for example, a personality system. And all that happens to purify that sheet is to rub it out or erase it out, but still maintaining the very sheet, which is the very platform of a mind consciousness system. And that very platform is a simple white light, light grayish silvery expression. So in terms of manifested as a proton, what the coloration of the resonance particle would be as it merges with substance was an array of colors which represented the various densities and intensities, manifestations and expressions of all the written programs, networks, patterns, interdimensions that the total personality consisted of and existed as. And when that slate is cleaned and cleared, that's when the basic primary foundation of a mind system manifests, which is like a white light, silvery gray, lightest coloration and expression. And when that manifestation emerges from the proton manifesting into the neutron, that's where the wires within the atom is automatically activated in terms of uploading the neutrons into, through, and as itself, and moving it through into and as the mind consciousness system. So this process of proton-neutron interrelationship, protons transforming into neutrons, neutrons being moved into, through, and as the wires, is a constant, continual process that happens multidimensionally in speeds that cannot be fathomed and conceived by the mind as the human being, and that's why the atom cannot be seen. It is moving at a speed that is not necessarily even being equated by and through speed. It is according to its quantum nature that it consists of and exists as, and the quantum jumps and quantum mechanics in relation to the atom we will definitely also be explaining, walking through. However, that's why human beings cannot see the atom directly in the multidimensionally as what it really functions, because of the nature of its movement, not necessarily according to speed or even within the quantum nature of speed. It is a total clearness that manifests at a source of existence as a whole. And we will later get into how the movement in fact manifests in terms of why we say that speed and even quantum time is limiting the very movement, functioning and existence of the atom as a whole. So let us get into the last part of this video interview in explaining the electrons functioning within the atom and their purpose for existing. Now, within the atom, it is currently understood that there is empty space within the atom itself. Now, understand that empty space is not really empty space. The empty space, as it is perceived or interpreted and observed, is in fact the pathways according to and within which the electrons within that empty space move within the atom. The very purposed functioning of the electrons within the atom, within that perceived or interpreted or believed empty space, is the maintainers of structure and the controllers of form, as well as the manifestations that keep the total functioning of the atom as a whole stable and in place. So according to how the electrons have been pre-programmed to move within and as the atom, will define form and manifest structure. And this is why and how everything within this physical manifested existence is being kept stable. It is manifested within the form and the structure that it consists of and exists as. It is the very movement, direction, pre-programming, interdimensional, multidimensional paths, patterns that the electrons are moving within, that is keeping everything as is. So let us have a look at, understand and remember, we're still only covering the very basics of how the atom function and exist and what it consists of and exists as. As I have said, we will be going into detail from this video interview onwards. So the electrons within the atom have a particular specific directional path that it follows. That directional path is designed within an infinity symbol. That's why everything is and always has been the same from the perspective of the very manifestation, form and structure of the human physical body, of Earth, of nature, of the animal kingdom, of this existence as a whole, in terms of how everything is perceived, believed, or experienced to be relatively stable, the same, and similar. Now, let us have a look in giving you an example of the movement of an electron within an atom. The movement of an electron within an atom. If you draw a bigger circle and a smaller circle within that circle, and you take a rim from the outer circle and you draw an infinity sign inwards toward the smaller circle, but usually if you have a look at an infinity symbol, you have the crisscross that manifests within the center. If you draw an infinity sign over itself over and over and over again, you have that center that's busy forming there. Now, the electron did not move particularly through an actual center point as one would have now drawn with drawing an infinity symbol over and over and over again, but moved in such a way within an infinity symbol design that it moved over the nucleus area of the atom, along the rim of the nucleus, and back down into the lower rim of the outer bigger circle, and then back up, crossing again, not making a actual cross as one would draw an infinity cycle symbol, but move again around on the other side of the nucleus of the atom. And within that, the very nature and movement of the electron maintained an infinity symbol. Infinity, the constant, continuous, exact same path, direction, movement, and program that the electron was pre-programmed as within its very manifested pre-programmed existence. And the electrons within the atom would move within those relationships over and over and over and over again. Exact same, infinitely. And that's what manifested the very infinite enslavement of human beings within our very existence as minds, as human physical forms, and the very enslavement of the existence of earth, nature, water, animal kingdom, planet, stars, existence. Everything was maintained within that very directional movement of the electrons within the atom. Now, why it is perceived as empty space by human beings is because what is not seen is the very multidimensional, interdimensional pathways that the electrons move within and as within that empty space. Now, what we have drawn is, for example, one electron's movement within an atom. All the electrons' movements within an atom would follow that exact same infinity path, infinity simple pathway within and through the atom over and over and over again, maintaining their pre-programmed pathways, their pre-programmed networks, their pre-programmed multi-dimensions, and interdimensions in their movement within and as the atom. And this is what manifested within existence as a whole, the interdimensions in layering existence with and as what is now experienced space and time. Within the atoms is where space and time exist in multidimensional, interdimensional networks, and also part of why and how existence within the physical had become more solidified and manifested through time in separating us from the interdimensions, and where heaven thus became dependent on only the substance of energy. Because within the infinity symbol design, now if one have a look at drawing an infinity symbol and you draw it over and over and over and over again, it comes to look like infinity symbols layered upon each other. And that is exactly how the electron move within its infinity symbol pre-programmed design pathway. It moves within infinity symbols that is layered in manifesting time as space, because the very shifting and movement of the electron through the interdimensions as the layers of the infinity symbol pathways is what manifests density. And then we have, it manifests density as well as space, because in how the infinity symbol pathways are manifested and actually layered within and upon each other, it gives you density within this physical manifested existence. So dependent on how dense a physical manifested form is, will depend on the amount of layered infinity designed symbol pathways the electron constantly and continuously moves through to maintain that very density. And then in terms of space and time is according to how the electrons are moving through all the layered infinity designed symbol pathways in the speed that it is pre-programmed within to move through the interdimensions and the layers of and as the infinity design symbols, which then gives you that concept of space and time simply equated with how the electron is moving within and through its pre-programmed design pathways, within and through the layers that accordingly signify density. And within that, in terms of the speed the electrons move through the infinity symbol design pre-programmed pathways, is also in terms of the speed according to which anything and everything within existence can move, which is that space-time equation, in how fast something can move within and as existence is equated within that very movement of the electrons within the atom of the very physical manifestation of this existence that is in fact moving. So everything within this physical manifested existence come from and is manifested of the atom according to how the electrons are moving within and through its infinity design pre-programmed pathways that is multidimensionally, interdimensionally layered in relationship to the mind consciousness system, and how those infinity designed symbols in the electrons pre-programmed pathways layered within themselves is as and when the atom in its relationship with the mind consciousness system interrelate and continuously functioning within and as themselves, is the protons and the neutrons constantly and continuously release resonance within the atom, and as that resonance is released from the nucleus into the atom, in where the electrons are functioning within their pre-programmed infinity symbol pathways, layered interdimensionally and multidimensionally, the electrons absorb that resonance, reflect and cross-reference their pre-programming of the total physical manifestation or physical form that they are forming part of in relationship to the mind consciousness system. And if there are more densities, more manifestations, or more relationships or additional networks, unified fields, programs that requires to be maintained within space-time physical manifested form density, then an additional pathway within the electron is pre-programmed, and the electron will additionally create within its infinity designed symboled pathway a movement and direction within interdimensions layered to be able to, within its very movement, facilitate that change within physical form in relation to the mind consciousness system. And so eventually, as the electron within the atom constantly and continuously layered itself automatically within the very infinity design symbol pre-programmed pathway, also facilitated the process of solidifying the human physical form, this total physical manifested existence within existence, and separating that relationship between the human and heaven. And understand that that very pathways of the infinity symbol design that the electron moved within, and it was always infinity design symbols, because why? It had to maintain physical form, it had to maintain pre-programming within existence constantly and continuously over and over and over again, and the only way to do that was through what? Infinity. Infinity is simply a replay of something over and 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 over again. That's why we as an existence have been existing in the exact same way, over and over and over and over and over and over again. And it is within the electron that all the information, manifestations, the total existence of the human being within the mind consciousness system and the physical was manifested within. And it simply moved within interdimensions within this infinity design cycle pathway as the program particle, the total life of the physical, the being, the mind, and everything and all within, and as it was contained within. That's why it had to move within its infinity design cycle pathways over and over and over again, as the very substance manifestation as electron that keep the total constitution of the being, the mind, and the physical in place. Okay, within the next video interviews to follow, we're going to have a look at the individual patterning of atoms within the human physical body in relation to a being and the mind, and how the atoms contained your basic total life patterns in your living experience of this world and this reality, in how the atoms had become and was utilized as primary enslavement initiatives in keeping a human being trapped within their beingness within only one point, in where, for example, you would live out your life facing, experiencing, being only one point, and how they separated human beings from eternity, from equality and oneness, from being equal and one with existence as a whole, through limiting their total one life on this earth with only 1 point. Life after life after life, you would only be limited to facing, experiencing, and being 1 point within everything that exists within this existence. Your beingness would be limited to that. Alright, and from there, from that total history in terms of the interdimensions and the physical of the atom, we will take on and have a look at the world's understanding of the atom. And from this, you can utilize these video interviews as your reference points in seeing, realizing, understanding how the atom really works, and why and how the current understanding, concept, and interpretation of the atom is, in fact, completely misunderstood. Thank you.